Hello again. Welcome to part two of the Great Kundalini Sexual Awakening Experience. If you haven't yet watched part one, you're going to want to pause this, stop this, and go there and listen to that. Otherwise, you're not going to get the background, and you're going to miss some funny stuff too. Because the best things in life are amazing and humorous, indeed. So I'm trying to think of where I left off exactly so I can go on with the rest of the story. So I was 42 and I had this Kundalini awakening, although I didn't know anything about, I had never heard the word. A good Christian girl who becomes a nice Christian mama doesn't even hear the word Kundalini. At least I hadn't. I had no idea what it was. And if I had, I would have thought it meant something like a demon possession. It would have completely bypassed my reality. But here I was, age 42, finally sexually alive after being rabidly frigid for my entire life to that point. I had 7 of my 8 children, and everything looked like it was amazing. I was enjoying even the simple, mundane things in life. Going to the grocery store was supercharged. Vacuuming, exercising, sitting and talking with my children, going out to dinner, just being alive, just being in my own earth suit felt incredibly supercharged with vibrancy and aliveness that I had never known before. It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But at the same time that was happening, there was something else happening that wasn't quite so wonderful. So my ex-husband had been ordained in an organization that was new, formed in the early 90s, but it was seeking to be instantly ancient. It wanted to go back in time. If you know anything about theological history, there was a time before the Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxies parted ways, where there was just the church for the first 300 approximate years, when bishops ruled everything. It was a very episcopal in the sense that there was a hierarchy, a pecking order, and you obeyed. You did what you were told, and these people were your covering. They were the I almost said the word medium, the go-betweens between you, the lowly human, and you were a lowly human, and the magnificence of God. You had to have all of these go-betweens. So my ex-husband was a deacon. He was ordained and he sort of ran the church. And then there was a priest, and then there would have been a bishop and an archbishop and the patriarch and all of those orders. And they were all men. All men. Yes, there were no women. We were it was God, patriarch, archbishop, bishop, priest, deacon, and wives were just above cattle and children. Not that there were any actual cattle, but you get the gist. So here we were in this organization, and though this was a healing ministry, people weren't really getting healed. Now I'd gotten healed of bulimia before, but because I went outside their covering, my healing was deemed to be at least inappropriate, if not highly suspect and possibly demonic. But I was healed, and the other people weren't getting healed of anything. So go figure. In this organization, we were very aware that a lot of people had been hurt through spiritual abuse. I didn't yet know just how rampant spiritual abuse actually is throughout Christianity, but it's inordinate, absolutely inordinate. And I don't mean sexual spiritual abuse, such as sexually abusing people, although yes, that happens too. But in this particular organization, what I'm talking about is people controlling each other, mandating things. So like we weren't allowed to have things in our home that were considered unspiritual or perhaps unclean. So if I went to a yard sale, I would have to take my car, past the priest house where they could come out and bless and cleanse everything of evil spirits and defilement that I picked up at yard sales. And oh my God, saying it right now seems ludicrous. But back then, we believed we were under that mandate. So we were wanting to expose some of the legalistic abuses that were happening among the people that we knew and loved within this church organization, including ourselves. And we didn't want to ruin anyone's career. We didn't want to bring anything down upon these people, because the priest and his wife were the godparents of our children. They were like parents, spiritual parents to us. We spent holidays with them. We went on vacations with them. They were in our lives, very close personal friends. And yet the spiritual abuse was happening. So we wanted to expose it appropriately for the purpose of healing. And my then husband went to the upper chain of command. He went to the local archbishop and told him what was going on. And he said he would investigate. We were to lay low. Well, we were happy laying low because I'd had this sexual awakening, and we were quite happy doing all the things that happen when someone finally has a sexual awakening. So we were good with the whole laying low part. And I'm happily doing my thing, writing on the marriage bed, the website I referred to in the last episode, and homeschooling my children, and doing art, and having a lot of sex, because yeah, sexual awakening, it leads to that sort of thing. Having a great time. And then we found out there was going to be this tribunal of sorts. We thought it was going to be he said versus he said, our local priest, godfather of our children, versus my ex-husband. And it was going to be a trial about the sexual abuse. Now, what we did not know is that this priest had caught wind that we were stirring the pot. So he went online and he searched for the way that I signed all of my emails, which was Shalom, Dina. Shalom, Dina. My ex-husband was Jewish. My children were half Jewish. Shalom is just a wonderful name that means peace. In fact, right now, I live in a city called Salem. Same root word, same etymology. It means peace. It's all good. But back then, he was looking for some kind of dirt on me where he could discredit our testimony. Maybe something like I was slandering him somewhere, because slander was a really big no-no. So if I was slandering him, then he could discredit whatever testimony we had against him and his legalism abuses of the other people in the church. So he searches Shalom Dina, and I naively, freely was signing all of my posts on the website, the marriage bed, talking about things like how I bought my first vibrator, and you'll hear that story back in episode 1, how I bought my first vibrator, how I learned to do a striptease to give my ex-husband an anniversary gift, how I overcame my aversion to oral sex. And I wrote about it, detailed, but non-salaciously, non-titillatingly. I can do that. I can do that. So this priest, godfather, friend of ours, finds all of my posts on this website, and he must have thought he hit the mother lode. He must have thought the dirt he could fabricate about me was going to put us away for good. But we didn't know all this, okay? My ex-husband was going into this tribunal blind. And once there, they brought out this list of posts that I'd written, copies of it, with portions taken out of context. So it looked like I was having illicit affairs with multiple men, cyber affairs, who knows what. I was paraded about as if naked, like I was the hussy from hell, in front of all of these men in the entire diocese of the Mid-Atlantic states. It was bad. It was so bad. And my ex-husband was told that he had to come home, confront me, that we had to leave our local church, that I was too dangerous to be around children because of how sinful I was. And after a year of being in a different church where I would receive counsel After a year's time of counsel, I would do a full confession in front of all of those men of my deviancy, of my sins, and then and only then would we be allowed back into our local church, provided I had repented, and I would probably be on probation, AKA in the spiritual doghouse, for the rest of my life. Now, when I heard this, the hot bath of shame that swept over me, I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me whole. I was devastated. And then all of a sudden, it's like my eyes were opened. And I looked at my ex-husband and I said, do you want me to go back to how I was before? Is my sin, what sin have I committed in finally desiring my own husband? His eyes were opened. He ended up turning in his resignation. This was his dream. He was bivocational. He worked for copier salesman for the federal government, but we didn't get money from the church. In fact, we were helping prop up the church with money we were giving it. But this was his dream, and he had to resign. He had to choose between his ordination and me. And in one of his finer moments, he did choose me, and we resigned. And we found out that the next night, our local church held a meeting of everybody but us. So about 150 people, including the children, showed up. Everybody but us. And I found out later that the priest stood in front of this group, and he had the parishioners come up one at a time, kneel before him and kiss his ring, his clerical ring, and swear allegiance to him, and to promise that they would turn their backs on us, that if they ever saw us in public, they were to shun us, to literally do a 180, turn their backs on us and walk away from us, from our children. That I had committed sins so egregious they could not be publicly uttered. All because I finally liked having sex with my own husband. Literally, that was my sin. My children lost all of their friends overnight without the chance to say goodbye. We lost our entire community. The homeschool group, of which I was on the board of directors, I was told I was no longer welcome there. They did not want to hear anything I had to say. I was just cut off, summarily, completely, no chance to defend myself. That scenario has happened many times in my life, where I'm at the receiving end of some version of mob rule, whether literal or virtual, and I don't get to explain anything. I'm just deemed bad, cut off. It's been a thing. So the next morning after getting this information, I'm in the bathroom trying to read the Bible. See episode 1 if you want some kind of backstory to why I do that, or did that for all those years. And I'm trying to pray to this God that I've always known. And all I can think is that the thing that happened to me in me, this revolutionary, miraculous change that happened to me, was the most real thing I had ever experienced in my life. It was the most divine, the most sacred, and whatever that God was that rendered me alive, that was the God that I wanted and needed to follow. And whatever God these people were representing, that they would call this a sin, a deviance, a demonic anything, they were the ones who were deceived, not me. I knew this with everything in me, and yet I was still experiencing this sense of a free fall with nothing to stand on, nothing to land, just like I was falling down a bottomless tube. And I remember crying out and saying with every fiber of my being, I want truth at all cost. Whatever this expression of the divine that had reached down and altered me, I wanted to know it experientially, firsthand, not some second-hand experience passed down to me from other people, something twice, thrice, a million times removed. I wanted the real thing. I wanted it in me. I wanted it all through me. And I wanted it full throttle, and I would settle for nothing less than that. And whatever the truth was, I wanted everything that was not truth, everything that would not stand up to intense scrutiny, everything that could fall, to fall. I wanted truth and nothing less. And I have been sold out to truth ever since. Truth at all cost. It has cost me. It's also priceless. That's my truth. We left that church. We found refuge in some other local churches, and then we ended up a year later moving cross country back to my home state of Oregon. I'm a seventh generation Oregonian whose father was a JAG officer in the Army. So I've lived all over the planet. I've spent time in Japan, Germany, all over the United States, Washington, D.C. a lot. The Pentagon has gravity sucking power. It will draw you in. So I've lived there 2 times for long durations. And we came to Oregon in August of 2005. The next year, I had baby number 8. Surprise, surprise. At the age of 45, I birthed my last baby. Yeah. All of my children are wonderful and amazing. I love them each and all for the incredible human beings that they are. And I'll get to that. There's been some pain there. I went on a journey of seeking out truth, no matter what it was going to cost me. I needed it that badly. There was nothing more important to me, nothing more precious to me than truth and following my own soul's purpose. Everything else was secondary. So here we were living in this gorgeous Victorian dream house in Dallas, Oregon, and we started doing house church because we couldn't find a church that really fit us. And the people who owned the marriage bed actually moved from Austin, Texas to live in our guest house. And we started building a small community. When you're already a household of 10 people who stay home 24/7, you're kind of a community unto yourself. So we had the 3 of them join us, and we had probably about 50 people in total living in the area, meeting with us on Sundays. And it was an all-day kind of thing. We had a potluck, we had open discussion. And if you're going to do church, that's the way to do church, honestly. And then I did a house church conference because I wanted to go to a house church conference, and I couldn't find a house church conference. And even though I didn't know how to create a house church conference, I figured it out, and we had one here in Salem back in 2006. No, 2007. And while I'm sitting there, a guy sitting behind me hands me this book, sort of in pre-publication form, self-publication form. He goes, "You need to read this. It's a Christian novel." And I said, "I don't read novels, and I don't read Christian novels. I read serious books." I was typically reading 2 to 3 books at a time, devouring them in my quest for truth. I didn't have time for a novel. But this one was called The Shack, by a man, William P. Young, known as Paul Young. So, all right, to please my friend, Jim Weedy. Hey, Jim Weedy. I read the book. I could not put it down. I sat there in the bathroom on the toilet reading this book until I would get ring around the buns from sitting on the toilet so long reading this book. I couldn't stop reading it. I was underlining, I was highlighting, I was writing in the margins. This book was phenomenal. It was all about this God who actually loved everybody. And there were all kinds of illusions about there not being judgment and a hell. And it was resonating with everything in me. That my insides were jumping up and down like, "Ooh, she's getting it. She's remembering, she's getting it." Because I had asked for truth at all costs, and truth was finding me. So I read this book, and I ran to everybody I knew, and I said, "Put down everything you're reading, including the Bible, and read this book." So they did. And then I wrote to Paul Young. I emailed him. I said, "Oh, I'm sure you've got many rabid fans. I live down here an hour south of you, and I've read your book, and I've gotten everybody in my house church to read it, and we're so excited. We love your book." And he wrote back and he said, "Could I come talk at your house church? That would be so cool." So In August of 2007, Paul Young came to my Victorian in Dallas, Oregon, and his first ever public talk was right there. And while he was giving his talk, he said something like this. He said, "Oh, I don't believe in hell." And it changed everything. And other people were alarmed, like, "What? You don't believe in hell?" As if believing in hell is the most important part of Christianity. And for a lot of Christians, it really is. Yeah. But I reached out and I grabbed his coat sleeve or his shirt sleeve. And I said to him, "I want to know everything you know." And for the next several months, he and I communicated, and he gave me access to his study notes. The word aeonian, which means of an age or pertaining to an age, has been mistranslated in the Bible to mean forever or eternal. And that was the beginning of the unraveling. And it took me 18 months of studying everything I could get my hands on, pro and con, to find out whether or not there really was a hell. I had to study the hell out of hell, and I was scared. I would go to bed every night praying that I not be deceived, because you don't want to end up on the wrong side of the equation of there not being a hell if there really is a hell, right? One of the turning points for me and finally letting go of this notion of hell, we were meeting with some friends of ours at a restaurant in downtown Salem. And I was feeling all kinds of angst because I had people turning against me, including the people who owned the marriage bed. They were living in our guest house, and they were alarmed that I was questioning things like hell, like judgment day, like the second coming, all those things. And they were pulling away from me. I was starting to lose friends, and yet I had to know the truth. So on the way to dinner, I just sort of called out to the version of God that I was coming to know was like in me more than outside of me, but still I'm talking to this God and I'm saying, "I need a sign that I'm not being deceived, that I'm on the right track with this quest for truth about hell." So we get to the restaurant, we're at dinner, and we're just talking and communicating. And then the gentleman, who's a rather prophetic gentleman, who, by the way, still to this day believes strongly in the doctrine of conscious eternal torment in hell. And he was alarmed about what I was studying, and he kept giving me pro hell books to read. He was my pro hell book pimp. God, he would hate that title. Anyway, in the middle of eating, he suddenly goes, "Oh, Dina, God gave me a vision to share with you today." And I'm thinking, yikes, what's this going to be? So he takes out his napkin and he draws this U shape, and he goes, "So this is a cliff, this U-shaped cliff, and this is the abyss in the middle." And I'm thinking, oh, there's a vision about an abyss. This is not good. And I'm bracing myself. I need to listen to this vision. And he says, and here you came walking to the edge of the cliff, and there was this crowd of people over here, and you said over your shoulder, "Come on, everybody, come on." And they all followed you to the edge of the cliff, and you all looked over the edge of the cliff. And I'm thinking, oh my God, not only am I deceived, but I'm deceiving others. Oh, I'm in such trouble. And then he goes on, "Came to this side of the cliff, and you said to everybody, 'Come on, come on.' And they all followed you, and they looked over the edge of the cliff." And I'm thinking, it's getting worse. I'm leading more and more people astray. And then you came to the other side of the cliff, and you looked over the edge, and all the people came with you. And I'm ready to just like, put me out of my misery. Put me out. But I'm thinking, I needed a sign. If this is the sign, okay, let this be the sign. I need the truth, no matter what it is. And then he says, "And then you're walking on the edge, and you're dancing on the edge. And I knew that if you went off the edge, there were going to be angels to catch you." And then I hear the voice of God up here talking to you. And I'm bracing myself. What am I going to hear? And God says, "That's my girl." I I melted. I mean, I just melted because I'd asked for a sign. And the sign was, I was doing what God, the divine, even his version, even Mr. Pro Hell, his version of God, was giving me approval for doing this search and for giving this the blow by blow journey of this discovery to so many people. I had an email list of a couple thousand people, and I had taken the book The Shack and gotten it into the hands of, I bought 5 cases and got them into the hands of every major ministry person I knew, because I used to travel in those circles. And the book became an Amazon #1 bestseller in just a couple of short months, all because they could be traced back to those first 5 original cases that I purchased and distributed. Once the logjam of hell had busted through, the flow burst out, and I was learning things at a rapid fire rate. I couldn't be stopped. I could not keep up with this churning evolution of doctrine and dogma that were tumbling like dominoes. And that's kind of like mixing the metaphors, because you don't typically have dominoes in a river, but you get the idea. It was all of those things, losing my earbud. Once that logjam went down, once I recognized that I was a dreaded universalist, meaning everybody goes to heaven, whatever Jesus did, it worked for everybody. The all in all means all, all that stuff. Then it was just kind of a short hop, skip, and jump to realize things like, oh, okay, that whole second coming thing, that whole destruction of the planet was actually, oh wow, destruction of Jerusalem that happened in 70 AD instead of hanging over our heads now. So when they said it was going to happen soon, they kind of meant it. They meant soon. It was not, 2000 plus years. And when Yeshua, which is what I call him because that's what his mama called him, when Yeshua said to the people listening to him after he gave them all of the forewarnings of what was to come, when he said, some of you standing here will not taste death until you see these things that I just told you come to pass. He was not saying, yo, all y'all, can you duck down? Thank you. You too, Judas, get low, because I want to talk over your heads 2000 plus years into the future. So just kind of ignore me. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to them one day. No, that doesn't pass the straight face test. He was talking to them standing there. And you know what? Almost 40 years later, in 70 AD, some of them did see those exact atrocities come to pass when Rome destroyed Jerusalem. There's no judgment day, people. It's not hanging over our heads. We do not need a World War III to make Jesus come back, because it already happened. It's done. It's in our past. It's in our history. Can we get over it already? So I was learning all that stuff. So no hell. Everyone is saved. Everything's been fulfilled. It was a real short process to realize that, oh my God, all is one. Everyone's one. We're all interconnected. And then all the dots fell into place. And suddenly I realized the God who had to kill God to appease God was a fabrication, that I had never been separated from the source of all life. How could anyone be separated from the source of all life and still live? What, there's an alternative life source? This doesn't make any sense. I didn't leave Christianity so much as I shed it. It got too tight. It was like a garment that was too tight and constrictive. And I had to shed it because I just kept growing. And the God of the Judeo-Christian mythology, and I apologize to you people who believe it if you're even watching this thing, that God was one that we invented in our own image. And God got too big, too vast, too good, too benevolent, and too non-exclusively male to fit in that box anymore. Now what I see is a more shamanic perspective, and I did get formally trained in shamanism a few years ago. So I'm a shaman. Please don't squeeze the shaman. I have to say that every time I say shaman, just because. But yeah, I would be somewhat of a hybrid with pantheism and panentheism. Pan meaning all, theism meaning the divine, and en meaning in. So it's a sort of a combination of the divine in everything and the divine is everything. Everything is God godding. Now, this is my perspective, my truth. I got here the long and hard way, not the easy, fluffy, light way. Truth at all cost has cost me. One of the other fallouts from my pursuit of truth was that I had to face the truth that my marriage, the one where I was married to the father of our 8 children, that marriage was based on incompatibility, that what we had primarily had in common was the children, the church, and the house that we were working on together. And I no longer had the church. The religion was gone from me. The children, of course, we had those and we still have those, but we wouldn't always. The children were going to get lives of their own. And the house can only sustain a relationship to whatever degree. And I had to face that he and I really had never had enough of anything in substance in common. And that the kindest thing I could do was to let a marriage that had died go, rather than taxiderm the dead marriage and prop it up in the living room and have my children pay homage to the dead thing. I didn't want my children to one day feel stuck in a marriage that no longer worked for them. And I had to face that my belief in the happily ever after until death do us part was humanly fabricated, and that there really is such a thing as a starter marriage, a marriage wherein you work out all of the unresolved childhood issues with someone who reminds you of one or both of your parents. And well, he knew my parents, both of them, before he knew me, and that's what that was. It was a starter marriage. And you can't go into a marriage knowing it's a starter marriage. You can't think, well, this will do for a few years until I work out all the kinks from childhood that are unresolved. And you have to believe it's a keeper, because otherwise it won't work. But you also have to be willing to do the merciful thing of letting it go once you realize what it is and that it served its purpose. Yeah. And sometimes the starter marriage can become the keeper grow old together marriage. And sometimes it doesn't work. I've heard it said we can have 2 to 3 long-term relationships in our adult life, and sometimes to the same person, but you have to renegotiate that, right? Because we change and we grow, and we're not meant to stay the same. The person I was when I married at 24 was not the person I was when I left at 48. A lot happened. I was meant to grow and change, and the relationship could not grow and change with me, though I tried and I wanted it to. It didn't sustain that. So I let it go. And in the process of letting it go in a way that was unimaginable and very upheavally, I did lose connection with many of my children. That was a price I didn't know I would have to pay. And if I had known that back in the bathroom that day when I asked for truth at all cost, I couldn't have asked for it. And yet I had to ask for it. I'm hoping that one day my children, maybe when they have their own children and they do things that unintentionally, inadvertently hurt their own children, that one day they might want to know the other side of the story, the part they haven't heard from me, the part I couldn't tell them then that they haven't heard since. And that maybe, especially after I hear their story and their pain and validate that, maybe we can have healing. I know my heart, my life, my arms will always be open to them. I have always loved them and I will never stop. What hurts me the most is for my children to believe that their own mother never loved them, as unfortunately they've been told and have concluded. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Nothing. I hope one day they can know how much they're loved and that they can have their hearts open to everyone in the whole equation, that there doesn't need to be someone to despise, only hurts to be healed. That's my hope. Yeah, there are times when I am slayed by that pain, when I am doubled over. I did not know I would have to endure that level of pain in my life. And there are other times when I can have the higher, deeper perspective of trusting in the bigger picture. Right now, I'm a little torn between the two. I'm feeling both. So, what else can I add to part 2 of the great Kundalini sexual awakening story? Once I had left Christianity and my marriage, and I was on my own, exploring my spirituality, my sexuality. Who am I really? So I'd been handed this spirituality. This is who you are. You are this Christian. This is what it looks like for you. And I discovered, no, that's not my truth. I wanted to know what the truth actually was. So too did I want to know what my sexual truth was, because I'd had unconscious monogamy and heterosexuality to me, because those were the only things afforded me, only things allowed. And I wanted to know, was that my truth? Experientially, is this my truth? So I did my exploring on that level. I wanted to know my truth, and I discovered definitively, with absolute conviction and experience, that yes, indeedy, I am monogamous, only not unconsciously so, consciously so. I know my choices, I know the options, and I am deeply wired to be consciously monogamous. I know this, I celebrate it. It's my absolute truth. I won't settle for anything else. That has actually cost me my second marriage, when we discovered that we were not compatible on those grounds, that he was not consciously monogamous as I was, as he thought he might be, as he wanted to be, to match me. We did not match there, relationally nor sexually. So my truth is, I am a consciously monogamous, heterosexual, sexually vibrant woman. And I've discovered that's hard to match. And I'm inordinately picky. I can't and won't settle. And I'm happy to say I have met someone, not yet in person, who does match me. So you'll have to stay tuned for that part of the story. That may be, I don't know, part 3. So here I was exploring spirituality in all of its varieties and flavors, and sexuality in all of its varieties and flavors. And I was hearing about this Kundalini thing, and it was like the merger of the two, right? And I kept thinking, I want that. I want that Kundalini thing. And I sought after it, and I read about it, and I read things like, well, sometimes people look like they're having a psychosis when they get the Kundalini thing. So, I don't want that part. And I remember, after all of this searching and reading, and like, how many YouTubes can you watch on the pineal gland and how to open that up and your third eye? And I was just like desperately seeking this this Kundalini thing. I even went to Poland and had ayahuasca experience and mushroom ceremonies and MDMA. And I was like looking for how to get rid of the fear and open myself up to the Kundalini thing that I wanted so bad. And one day, talking to a friend on the phone, he said, you're looking for this Kundalini thing, but tell me again that story about that thing that happened to you in the church parking lot way back in 2004. So I tell him the story, and he goes, what do you think that was? That was a Kundalini thing. And I felt like I was in, the final chapter of the hero's journey, where I go out looking for the thing, and I'm looking far and wide, and I'm searching, and I'm overcoming obstacles and battles and trying to find the treasure, only to realize I had it all the time. It's like Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz. She goes on this journey, and she ends up saying, it was in you all the time. There's no place like home. Big fat duh. Big cosmic duh. So, yeah, the Kundalini thing that I was looking for, I already had it. How's that for irony? How to wrap all this up in a nice, neat bow. Be careful what you ask for, but ask. Ask with all your heart, every fiber of your being. Go after your deepest, truest passions. Follow your soul's purpose. See, I believe that what happened to me was not a rare oddity, even though it kind of makes me a rare oddity. I kind of believe that every human being is meant to have this merger of sexuality and spirituality. I really believe it. See, I really dare to believe that spirituality and sexuality are the two primary and foundational energies that comprise each and every human being. But that we've been taught spirituality is unattainable and sexuality is denigratable, and we don't realize that they go together. They go together. They're meant to. They're meant to be the two energies that penetrate and permeate everything about us, everything we do, everything we think, everything we feel, the way that we relate, our passion for what we do with a partner, with our careers, the way we express ourselves, the way we talk, the way I'm talking right now. I am supercharged with spirituality and sexuality right here, right now, all the time, 24/7. I can't turn it off. I can't make it go away. I'm always on. I believe we humans are meant to be always on. I do. I believe that. I wish I could figure out a way to transmit that same experience to each person. I wish I could bottle it. I wouldn't sell it. I'd give it away. Except, you kind of have to value it enough. So maybe I would charge something. Otherwise, people wouldn't even bother if it was free. And that's not the point. That's not the point. Open yourself up to who you really are. Be willing to follow your soul's purpose, whatever it is, wherever it takes you. Be willing to find truth at all cost, to take all the things you think you think you believe, and put them to the side and say, open me. Open me up to truth. Open me up to my soul's purpose. Open me up to the merger of sexual and spiritual energy that make me fully human, fully alive. Ask for it. Ask. And be willing to receive. I promise it's worth it, even with the pain. I promise. Well, I don't have a neat and tidy way to wrap this up. So thanks for listening to my story. It's part of my heart. It's part of my soul. It's probably the most vulnerable and intimate that I can get with a group of people. I wish you every blessing. Stay tuned because I got more stuff I want to talk about. Thank you for listening to my story. Bye-bye.